Let us listen to these words on today's reading from Affirmations for Self-Healing. It's on the topic of truthfulness. Truthfulness is not caustic statements of unpleasant facts and unflattering opinions. Such statements are usually born of pride, but truthfulness is the effort always to see the divine truth behind appearances. It is the effort to express always that aspect of truth which may prove the most beneficial. Truthfulness, as applied to ourselves, means not to hide behind self-flattering justifications. To work honestly at our real motive, to look honestly at our real motives for doing anything, and not to flinch before unpleasant realities in ourselves. Truthfulness means seeing things as they really are, but then looking more deeply for ways to improve those realities. So let's repeat today's affirmation together. First, we'll say it normally is just, we'll say it loudly, and then a little more softly, and so on. Repeat after me. Whatever is, simply is. I cannot change it for the mere wishing. Fearlessly, therefore, I accept the truth, knowing that at the heart of everything, God's truth is always good. And again, a little bit more softly, at a normal voice, whatever is, simply is. I cannot change it for the mere wishing. Fearlessly, therefore, I accept the truth, knowing that at the heart of everything, God's truth is always good. Once more whispering, whatever is, simply is. I cannot change it for the mere wishing. Fearlessly, therefore, I accept the truth, knowing that at the heart of everything, God's truth is always good. And finally, now mentally, taking that thought, focusing up at the spiritual eye, affirming this, whatever is, simply is. I cannot change it for the mere wishing. Fearlessly, therefore, I accept the truth, knowing that at the heart of everything, God's truth is always good. And our prayer is, Heavenly Father, I will not fear the truth, for I know that truth comes from Thee. Help me to see behind all appearances Thy smiling, all compassionate gaze. Om Shanti. Now, we're going to have our reading, yes, from the Rays of the One Light.
Hi, Jai, everyone. Today's topic is called the inner kingdom. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your depths and self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Most people imagine that the inner kingdom, as Jesus described, lacks of fascination they attribute to sense life. The bright lights, the diverse attractions, the joys and the laughter. Little do they realize what a vast universe exists in their own selves. There are many passages in the Old and New Testaments of the Bible that describe aspects of this inner kingdom. In the book of Genesis, we read, "And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil." This garden was in no earthly place. It exists even now, in the very self of every human being. The legend of Adam and Eve is allegorical. It describes how the first human beings dissipated their spiritual energy, centered in the spine. The spine is the channel through which flows the river of baptism and of spiritual life. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, the wise speak of an eternal Ashwanta tree, with its roots above and its branches below. The tree of life, spoken of also in Genesis, is the spine. Its roots are above in the brain's energy. Its branches are the outward spreading nervous system. When the sap, which is to say the energy, flows downward to the consciousness, is drawn into delusion. On the other hand, when the energy is drawn upward in deep meditation, the consciousness is drawn toward its internal source, God, and is at last united with Him. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita therefore urges his chief disciple Arjuna to embrace the yoga science, the path of meditation. The yogi, he says, is greater than ascetic, greater even the followers of the path of wisdom, Jnana Yoga, or of action, Karma Yoga. Be thou, O Arjuna, a yogi. For those who would find the divine truth, Krishna gives the description of the yogi. Steadfast a lamp burns, sheltered from the wind. Steadfastly meditating, solitary. Such is the likeness of the yogi's mind, shut from sandstorms and burning bright to heaven. Those through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Thank you, Akhil, very much. Thank you. That was, and again, today's topic, we're speaking about the inner kingdom. And again, as I was saying at the very beginning, or maybe I didn't say it. I can't remember exactly. But we tend to look about us, and we don't. Is it a reality for us? Most people, we look about and we just see that this world is just matter, seemingly just matter, and it's a day-to-day experiences, and people are working, and you have to do all of the various things just to keep this body and soul together. And when we speak about topics such as this, it seems to be very, very remote for people. But yet, I'm reminded of there's a song that one of Swamiji's he would sing, and I think it's one of the verses that goes, it says, "There's joy all around us. Why wait for tomorrow? We've only this moment to live. A heaven within us is ours for the finding. A freedom no riches can give." So there's a heaven within us for the finding. But how many people look for it? How many people experience that? I remember when I was a child, I always had this sense that there was something. I mean, is this it? Is this what it? There must be something more, but nobody spoke about anything more. And so consequently, I think many children sometimes they come into this world, perhaps they have memories of the astral world, but they certainly aren't affirmed. People think, oh, that's not, it's sort of they're non-recognized. And eventually, if the child gets a little bit older and they start to, they forget, but there's no support for that. And so they begin to think, well, that must be just something very personal just to me. There's no reality to that. But something in my life, and perhaps I speak for some of you, something in that there was something, I always felt there was something more. Is this material? Is this all that there is? Now, I'm not denying that the truth is what it is, and this seems to be here, but is this all of it? Might there not be something more? And I think many people have had this experience, and I think this is one of the reasons why many people they react positively when they read the autobiography of a yogi. You read the autobiography, and yes, I felt an attraction to Master Paramahansa Yogananda, But it was more than that. There was something else that drew me in, that he was intimating that there is something more, something deep down that I was suspecting, and I, or maybe I was hoping, maybe it was just a daydream or a wishful thinking, but I recognized, and I think this is one of the things that is that when some truth, deep down truth, is revealed to us, we recognize it already. It's like an old memory, Shmiti. It's something I knew already. I says, yes, that's it. Yes, that's it. That's what I've been seeking, something along these lines. And here's somebody who, in this book, who understands. Now, I had read other mystical literature, but somehow I didn't get that sense that here's somebody who really knew, who understood what I was feeling, an inner kingdom beyond this seeming outer world, which of course is spoken of. Many saints and probably have spoken of that, but somehow when Master said it, it resonated. It seems so very true. And of course I doubted, and I thought, well, is this really, am I just wishful thinking? But then the thing that intrigued me particularly about Master's teachings was he was saying, this can be tested. And that's what convinced me, or at least it didn't convince me of the truth of it, but it convinced me to try. This can be tested. And then later I met Swamiji, and he told that story of Dr. Lewis meeting Master and how Master showed him the spiritual eye. But there was also another story that some of you may know this other second story, but it was also, I found it very, very fascinating. And this was about how Master, when he went to the United States, he, as we know, he landed in Boston and he was there for a few years. But then he began to travel around the country. And he was going by train mostly. And he went to many, many major cities. And he went to the city in the 1920s, mid 1920s. He went to the city of Minneapolis. And now he went to many others, but this story, who's the man who's telling the story was in Minneapolis, and he said Yogananda came, and I believe it was 1927, and he came to Minneapolis and he stayed. He stayed for somewhere between 1 and 2 months. So he would not just passing through, and he stayed long enough to give a full course of his teachings. And so it obviously very condensed, and he went one after the next. And he introduction and the and of course many people were attracted. They came to his lectures, but it whittled itself down as people were taking the course. And finally he finished the complete course. Now he didn't. The author of this story didn't say what that totally meant, but the implication was he took them perhaps up to Kriya Yoga. And then when the course was completed, Yogananda contacted all of the people that he had, the disciples that he had made, that had taken discipleship and taken Kriya. He called all of them, or contacted all, and says, come back for one, I want you to come back for one special course, a last course. And I want to show you something. And I imagine most everybody did, and this person certainly made room in his schedule to go. But it sounded as if there were not many there, a room full of people, he said. And what Yogananda did, he says, I want to show you the light. And he went from one student to the next, and he would go up to them, and he would sort of, maybe he would even close their ears, I don't know, but he'd put his hands there and he'd press with his thumbs on their spiritual eye. And he says, now look up into the light. And he would hold that position, and the person would look up into the light, and then he would take his hands off. He says, do you see it? And they said, yes, yes. And he would reveal to one, to the next, the inner spiritual light until they would go into a deep state and looking. He says, go into that light. One by one, all the students. Now, the person who was telling the story sort of sheepishly said, well, he came up to me and he pressed his thumbs there and he said, do you see the light? And he said, now I didn't want to say I saw it if I didn't see it. So he says, no, sir, I don't. And Master stopped and looked and he says, well, let's do it again. And he did it again. And then he did it 2 or 3 times. And he says, do you see the light now? He says, no. And then each time you could see Master became more determined till finally, giving it his ultimate effort or whatever. And he said, the man then said, then, he says, the light revealed itself to me and I went in. He says, and through doing that, not only did he see that light right at that time, he says, but every day after that, he would do the practices, he says, that were taught to me, and he'd see that light, and he says, I came day by day to understand what heaven was. And now he didn't elaborate beyond that, but isn't that marvelous? He could actually experience. Now, when and I'm not sure if it was in this trip to Minneapolis or another, but maybe it was a subsequent one. He went to Minneapolis and had a huge crowd come out for his lecture, many thousands. And afterwards, one of the assistants who had helped put on the program came. Oh, wasn't that a wonderful program and so well received, Master? Thousands of people, and Master just calmly and dryly, you might say, yes, it was, but we'll be lucky to get five out of all of that big crowd of thousands. And as it turned out, they did a class series afterwards, and yes, out of that whole group, 5 people. Now, that's how it is so much. People get so enthusiastic and they're what, but then when it comes down to it, it turns out to be 5 people out of thousands. Well, that's what Krishna said, didn't he? One out of 1,000 really seeks me. And in the autobiography, Master says this. He says, divine union is possible through self-effort and not dependent on theological beliefs or on an arbitrary will of a divine cosmic creator. I found that. I think it's at the end of I think Lahiri Mahashaya is saying that, so that chapter. And maybe it's the Cosmic Consciousness chapter, but he says it's possible. Divine union is possible through self-effort. But note that word self-effort. It's available. People want that, but they want it to be given to them. Well, the pathway is given to us. The opportunity is given to us, but we have to walk that pathway. So note the word self-effort. To know there's an inner kingdom waiting for us is a fine thought, that there might be something more, but it's how about are we going to actually make the effort to do it? I remember I was giving in Gurgaon, I was giving a lecture series on, I think it was the Holy Science, and had a pretty good turnout. And there was one fellow came up to me after the class. He was on fire, so enthusiastic, and he says, "Oh, my life has been changed. This class was so wonderful, and I just I would just want to follow up on it." And he says, "I want to come meditate with you." And I said, well, okay. And now at that time, I was staying at the ashram there in DLF Phase 1. And I says, why don't you, my habit at that time, my routine at that time was I'd meditate from about 5 in the morning till 7. And so I says, I tell you what, I'll unlock the gate in the morning and you can join me. I meditate from 5 to 7. You come during that time and I'll be there every day this week. And I was in Pune, but I was visiting, there. So I'll be there for a couple of weeks and you come and join me. And so he says, I'll be there. Yes. Yeah, definitely. Now you know where this story is going. Next day I get up and I unlock the gate and I go, we're meditating there. Did he come? No. Did he come the next day? No. Did he ever come? No. And you see, this is how it is. People get so excited about something and then they like to think about it and read about it and talk about it. And so this is why you feel people love to go to classes about the chakras, don't they? It's one of the most popular class series. Oh, it's wonderful. They like to hear about it. planes of existence, fascinating, esoterica. But is that enough? How many actually come to morning meditation? How many come to the morning meditations at your center? Well, I'm not criticizing if you don't, because it's, you meditate at home, I hope. But why not come together and just put these things into practice? Make the effort. And I think this is what separates, not to be gender biased, but the men from the boys, is those who actually put effort into it. It's the price we have to pay. And the master, then of course we all know that story of master in the dusty village looking up at the mountaintop. And oh, it's too far for me, too far for me. Well, the master, and then in this is master's dream, of course, and he says, well, I will make that effort. And this is what we have to do. We have to make that effort, and we have to make, you might say, the changes that are in ourselves to be able to make that effort. Now, it starts though with one foot in front of the other. That fellow could have come. I didn't care if he came for 5 minutes. That would have been great. But to actually put something into motion, and Swami asked me how much when I got started meditating. I told him I couldn't meditate at all. I didn't think I could. He says, well, just what can you do? And can you meditate a few minutes? I said, yes, I can. Do that. Start there and you work your way up. Well, when I was first started meditating, in the early, as I was a young man, particularly, I think all of us have people in our life that influenced us. And I had many people influence. And I remember there was one man this is before I came to Master's teachings. I was in college at the time. I met a man, his name was Roy Kepler, and he owned a bookstore. A wonderful man. But it wasn't so much, he had an influence on me. And I respected him enough to follow some of his advice, and he was a Quaker and Quakers, they sit in silence, they meditate. And he says, and I said, well, maybe I should start meditating. Well, he said, that's up to you. He says, but he wanted me to read certain books. And one of them, he says, why don't you get to know Mahatma Gandhi? And I knew very little. I had heard the name, but I knew very little. And so I began to study, read his biography, then I read his autobiography. And I was very, very inspired. I think he recommended Gandhi to me because I was activist at that time. And one thing stuck out, and I think this was the point that Roy Kepler was making to me, that stuck with me from Gandhi's teaching, which many things did. But one thing, remember, Gandhi's famous for this quote, be the change you want to see. Now, as I said, in those days, I was a student activist, and I wanted everything to change, idealism and so on. But was I willing to change? Was I willing to do anything? Oh, wanted other people to change, that's for sure. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody changed, made themselves better? But what about me? So I realized it dawned on me. I was the one who had to change first. And it's wonderful to be filled with enthusiasm and all that, but to take it ultimately to the to the point of changing ourselves, and day by day by day, the little things. And one of the things that I read in the autobiography of in the yogi, is that yes, you can change. You can find this inner kingdom, and there was reference to a kriya shortcut. I said, that's for me. I want the shortcut. And I think that's what everybody wants. They want the Kriya shortcut. And we all want Kriya shortcuts in life. We discover we need, I don't want to work hard and take the long way out there, or the arduous way there. I want the magic way. And I realized that was my attraction to Kriya, that it was giving me a shortcut. It was like the magic pill that was going to get me to Samadhi. And I learned that no, it's going to take a lot of work. We need to make change not because Kriya is far away, not because God is far away. It's because I'm far away because I've got all of these things in me that have to change. And the very first basic ones is what all of these years, 50, 60 years later, it all comes back to the basic things. We have to show up. We have to show up. We show up at the altar of God inside. And that's our Kriya practice. We have to show up at the altar. But before we get to altar, we have to go to the church, you might say. The church, we have to sit down in our meditation room. We have to join the congregation. We have to do those things that we know are necessary. And we think, well, if we get a certain point, we can avoid those things. There's you probably go on the internet and everybody wants to lose weight and be fit, and there's lose 10 kilos in a month by this new diet, you know knew this, knew that, there. But find God with this new technique. This will get you there. The new, you might say, this new truth that will is being offered. And of course, we know there is no such thing as a new truth. It's only one truth. And the necessity of that truth is hard work. To find that truth is hard work, discipline, interchange, and sacrifice. Sacrifice of the little self is what this is about. And I think, in a sense, uh, maybe I'm not romantic enough, to the, because I know people, they rebel against those basic things: hard work, discipline, interchange, sacrifice. And yes, it takes time, but here's the point. Remember from the Gita, even a little practice. Remember how it says this in the second chapter, even, and we say this at our Kriya initiation. So Lahiri Mahashai said, when we give Kriya, we should always repeat this. Even a little practice of this inner religion will free one from dire fears and colossal sufferings. And anyway, that's what we have to remember. Even a little practice, and this we take that on faith. And why do all of this? It's because it works. Because even with a little bit of practice, we find the fruits of the inner kingdom begin to come to us little by little. Look for those little fruits, taste those fruits, enjoy those fruits, and put them into practice. And that sometimes people they tend to come onto this path. They're looking for psychic experiences to validate this actually works, or or whatever it might be. They look for, you might say, miracles to happen. The miracle is just inner peace, inner change, inner little bit of inner joy. And if we begin to understand that and cultivate that in the little ways, in what's right in front of us right now. And and some of us, and I speak to my own self, is I've been on this path a long time, but I could still get frustrated. Somebody, behaves in a certain way, and I go, oh, and then, and I can kind of, they shouldn't do that. And then I back up and I have to laugh. Well, they did. That's truth. And the fact is they did. But that's that initial reaction and that sense of joys and ups and downs of life, of getting frustrated and then, losing your center. This happens. Of course, the longer you go, the less it happens, or less violently it happens. The waves, you could see, tend to moderate themselves out. But remember, every day when you meditate, try not to get up from your meditation until you feel a little bit of joy, a little bit of peace, a little bit of inner calmness, whatever it is. Don't get up until you feel just a little bit of that, a taste of that. And then when you taste it, get up and then, take it with you and just hold on to that. And every day when you meditate, every time you meditate, if you just get a little bit of it, you'll feel that that becomes your reality. And God comes to us, and it doesn't come to, God doesn't come just as in the Bible. They said, it's like a thief in the night, comes in the back door. We're looking at the front door, and it always seems to sneak in to the back. But the point of this is get started and act. Move in a positive direction. Our Dharma is right before us in everything we do. To act rightly, to not react in a negative mood, and something happens, react in the wrong way. That's in the small things in life, and eventually we find banat banjai. It happens that way, and we don't know how long it'll take. We don't know how long it's going to take to transform ourselves. But the important thing is we get started, in every action you'll begin to feel that change. The door to the inner kingdom begins to open. It opens in the sense of that that there's joy in the heavens. You begin to feel it's all right. There's joy there. It's more than all right. It's there. Now, why did devotees give up or lose it? Don't follow, keep going. And this is, I have a little bit of time left. I want to focus on this in conclusion. Uh, there's another ingredient. I think we have to boil our life down to certain what's important for us. Sitting, not getting up from our meditation to feel at least a little bit of taste of it. That's one thing. That's one of my personal affirmations, you might say. I think there's a couple of others, though, that you might consider. Swami was once interviewed, and this when he was, I think he was, where was he? Yeah, I think he was out there with Tunde, I think. Anyway, somebody came in and interviewed him, and they asked him to describe your spiritual, how would you describe your spiritual path? And Swami immediately said two things, Guru Seva, Guru Bhakti. And without hesitation, he says, those are the two elements that are the core of my spiritual life. Now notice in both of those, it was Seva and Bhakti, but it was Guru Seva, Guru, to give, in other words, so my original question is, why do people lose enthusiasm? Why do they maybe even give up? And is the lack of that devotional focus. And I think we need to have an ingredient, development of that devotional focus of bringing the heart in. And now people say to love God. It's hard to love God because it's such a vast concept, but I know people do that. Usually you have to take God and personalize it to some degree to make it real to us, ourselves. People do this in different ways, Krishna, Ram, so on. But for me, and I think this was Swami, is Guru becomes the embodiment of the divine. Gurus and serving God, loving God, giving our devotion to God, Guru Bhakti, Guru Seva. And you make it, and in other words, I think we need to make our devotion personal. And some of us, rather than keeping it very impersonal, and because you can talk to a person, you can talk to, and then so consequently we can have, or you might say Guru and Divine Mother for me, somewhat synonymous. We talk to Divine Mother. Divine Mother is another mess you've gotten me into, or whatever it might be. God will not disappoint us if we develop that relationship. We ask God, and God, of course, asks of us as well, but mostly God asks for our love. That's what God is looking for. But if we make the effort, no effort goes unfulfilled. I remember there was even this story comes to mind. Master was on a train, I believe, in the United States, and he was traveling. And this man who was very cynical and dismissive of what told him in loud voices, well, you're going to be very disappointed when you die and find that there's nothing there. There's nothing to it. And of course, how can you be aware there's nothing if there is nothing? But anyway, he says that you're going to be very disappointed when you die. You'll find that all of what you're talking about is not true. But Master didn't argue with him. He could see the man was not open. He says, well, at least I'll have the satisfaction of knowing I've done something good. And he could have said other things too. I've helped other people. Remember, it's in the seeking of that where joy is found, not the finding of the rainbow over the horizon. It's joy in the seeking, the very seeking. And sometimes I think we meditate because we're looking for the result. Oh, I didn't feel any joy. It's in the doing, in the job that we're doing, in the Guru Seva we're doing, in the Guru Bhakti we're doing. It's in that, not what we're going to get out of it. It didn't give me anything. Well, it's in the doing. That's where the real results. And this is the beauty, I think, of the autobiography. Read again and again. It offers such hope and inspiration. It gives us that very simple pathway. If we just make a daily self-effort, and ultimately we cannot see behind the screen of what's happening, but there is an inner kingdom awakening there within us, little by little, and that veil that separates us becomes thinner and thinner. Those who are willing to dedicate a lifetime of sincere effort, the promise is in there. The people who are stick it out to the end, like Master said, even if it comes to the point of dying, he or one of the masters will be there to greet us and take us across that ocean of death. For every one of us, that story is true. That promise is true. It will be true. We just have to try. I think that's all that, God and gurus don't expect us necessarily to accomplish everything. All they ask is that we try. All that they ask is we put in our little effort, and then they have something to work with. So keep these thoughts in mind as we go forward through the next week. That inner kingdom is right behind the sunbeams. Look up into the spiritual eye. Know that it's there, and Master and the gurus are wanting to reveal it to us. Our job is through our self-effort, open ourselves up to allow that light to shine within us. God bless all of you.